So I want to talk to you tonight about being a dispenser for God. Do you know that people all around you are counting on you being a dispenser? Every dispenser looks different. I love this illustration, and I love to use it everywhere that I go. How many of you have ever seen a Pez dispenser this big? Probably not. Pez dispensers, they all have different heads. They all have different colors. They're different characters. I think you can even have one made into your own face. But every Pez dispenser is awesome because when it opens its mouth, something great pops out, right? No one feels guilty for eating Pez because it's a tiny little morsel of goodness. I mean, who can put the Pez candy in the Pez dispenser for their children without some of them falling out, and then God knows we have to eat those extra ones. So it's a beautiful thing when your kids have a Pez dispenser, but every time I see a Pez dispenser, I think about all the people of God that look different and are different characters and different colors and different ways and different types, but we're all the same in one way, that when we open our mouth, it should be filled with goodness. Everyone should love to see a Christian dispenser coming their way. How many of you believe that when people see you coming their way, they should be ready to eat of the goodness of God that's on the inside of you? Y'all are not really that convincing, actually. That was a pitiful excuse for a hand clap. How many of you believe that when someone runs into you, they should be experiencing the goodness of God? Thank you. That was awesome. The Pez dispenser always reminds me of this. I love these things because whenever that mouth opens up, sweetness flows. And yummy is right, Chapel. Thank you. We have the goodness and the sweetness of God on the inside of us. It's called the Word, the blessing, the Christian lifestyle. Everything about us, when we open our mouth, it shouldn't be negative. It shouldn't be this. It should be something positive. And the thing that makes us that way is whether or not we have chosen to be a believer. Now, a lot of people call themselves a believer. They call themselves a Christian. They say that they love Jesus. They go to church. They have all of these things right. But how many of you have ever run into some church folk that you're not buying it? You're not just sure that Jesus has been in visitation with them on the regular. I don't know about you, but I want to be the kind of Christian that people run into, and if they're sick, they know healing's coming at them. That if they have marriage problems, they know that I'm going to speak life over them. That if they're struggling in school, that they know that I'm going to be the one that speaks that life over them, that sends them and gives them just enough of a nudge to just make it through the next lap of their journey. I want to be that kind of believer, not because I'm a preacher, because I love Jesus and I want to be one of his kids. God speaks life over people. He causes people to have the miracle that they need. I want to read to you from Mark 5 today. And I want to talk to you about being a believer. Therefore, in that way, you are a dispenser of God. Then they came to the other side of the sea, the country of Gadarenes. I do not know what we're doing there. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he often had been bound with shackles. I think I'm in the wrong place, guys. I am so sorry. I've got someone else's Bible up here. And I'm just going to go to what I have on my notes. 1 second. Let me make sure that I've got you guys in the right place. Okay, we're all right. I think it's good. It's just saying it a little bit different. Who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains. The chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." For he said, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Guys, I really am sorry. I'm having a struggle here really quick. I am in the wrong place. See, you got to get your verse together before you get in the pulpit. Everyone stretch your hands out to me. I had 3 children screaming at me before I walked up here, so I just need a little bit of help. Y'all going to have some grace on me tonight. I'm in the wrong verse, but not the wrong chapter. So let's go Mark 5 and verse 21. We're going to start again. Now, when Jesus had crossed over again by boat to the other side, a great multitude gathered to him, and he was by the sea. And behold, one of the rulers of the synagogue came, Jairus by name. And when he saw him, he fell at his feet, and he begged him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter lies at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, that she may be healed, and she will live." So Jesus went with him, and a great multitude followed him, and they thronged him. Now, if you go down into the next couple of verses after this, you're going to see the woman with the issue of blood. How many of you have ever heard the story of the woman with the issue of blood? This man named Jairus is one of the leaders in the synagogue, and he has a child that is on the verge of death. And he goes out and he is looking for Jesus. And he says to Jesus, "I need you to come with me now because my daughter is on the verge of death." How many of you know parents will do whatever it takes to get their baby the miracle that they need? I'm telling you, mothers, let's all face it, Jairus went, but who sent him? You know that mama's the one that sent him. She said, "I'm going to stay here with this baby, and you're going to go get Jesus because we know that when Jesus shows up, people pop up. And I need this kid to come out of this thing and stay alive. So go on." I mean, Jairus is getting a lot of playtime right now on this scripture, but I'm positive that that woman was the one that sent him after Jesus because I know a mama. And listen, I know daddies. I've watched daddies fight for their kids in hospitals like nobody's business. I have seen men call us to the hospital day after day after day until their baby gets their miracle. I have a personal friend right now who has a 17-year-old daughter that is healthy and whole, that was told to us that she would never live one day, that she would have to have heart surgery as soon as she popped out. And he called every man and woman of God that he knew, and he fought night and day. He didn't sleep for almost two solid weeks, besides just 15 minutes here and there when he knew that someone else would stand in the gap for her. I have seen what parents do when their babies are sick. There is nothing they will not do. And Jairus goes after Jesus, and he says, "You have to come with me now because my baby is on the verge of death." Now, I'm going to tell you as a mom, there is nothing I wouldn't do with those kids. We had an AR test to take at the end of semester. I was pumping Justice up. "Justice, you got what it takes, buddy. You go in there, you show them who's boss on that AR test. I'm telling you, you got 3 left today, 3 left to take, and then you're going to do awesome." And he's saying, "Okay, Mom." I said, "What are we going to do today?" He said, "We're going to win at the AR test." "Yeah, you got what it takes." I'm pumping him up. He walks into that school, stays all day. I didn't go up. I'd been there all week trying to help him. I'd come home early from a conference that I was supposed to be at, that I'd given my word that I'd be at. I said, "Guys, I'm sorry. We got a little issue at home. I'm going home because my boy has to win." I showed up every single day till we were at the very end. I said, "Buddy, you got what it takes." I walked in that afternoon. His teacher was supposed to help him get this AR test done, and she had forgotten. I said, "Justice," he said, "I didn't take it, Mom." I said, "Buddy, we're not leaving this place till that AR test is taken." Went up to the teacher. I said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you, but we have an AR test to take because we are going to be a winner this semester." She said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the library is closed." I said, "I don't think you heard what I just said." I said, "My son needs to take an AR test by the end of the semester. All you teachers, forgive me. I'm that crazy mom." She said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but the library is closed." I said, "That's beautiful. I appreciate that. Where is the other computer that we can fulfill our AR test on?" She said, "Mrs. Gibson, it's past time. You need to go home. The semester is over." I said, "I don't think that you completely understand. You see, I am the girl that's not leaving this school until that boy wins because we are winners." She said, I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't help you. I said, you are not my people. So I went to the other teacher that looked more friendly. And I said, ma'am, what can we do? This is just an AR test. This is just a win for my kid. I want my kids to know what it feels like to win. I said, I need your help. We sure do appreciate all you do. I need a computer to take an AR test on before we leave today. So, oh, ma'am, that time is up. The library is closed. I appreciate that. I love that. But you look like someone who wants to help me, and we need a win. So I'm just asking if you could help. She said, and just about that time, the first teacher looked, and she saw I'm not giving up. So she just took me by the hand and led me to the computer lab. We took our march of victory. We took our AR test, and I'm here to report to you today that we are AR winners in the Gibson house. If a mama will look like a complete idiot for an AR test, what would we do for a sick baby? Parents are ruthless when it comes to this kind of thing. This man goes and he says, Jesus, I need you to come with me now. It's a pretty big deal. He's used to getting what he wants. And Jesus says, I'll come. And he begins to follow him. And this throng of people begins to come. And they're following after him. And they're chasing him down. And then the woman with the issue of blood has the audacity to grab his cloak. He's looking at her thinking, lady, we don't have time for this right now. I get it. You're weak. You've been to all the doctors. It's kind of a big deal. You think you're just going to sneak in here and grab Jesus' garment. He's going to feel virtue come out of him. Are you kidding me? He felt the virtue leave him. You know he's frustrated. And yet he will not give up on what it is that he wants. The woman, he stands and he helps her. Did you know that Jesus is not rushed by your need for a miracle? Jesus was not the slightest bit concerned about missing the timetable because Jesus knows that on the inside of him is the same power that raised Christ from the dead, and it dwells now in you and me, but it was right there with him. And he knew, I can raise from the dead. I can raise you from the dead. I can bring Lazarus back from the I can do whatever it takes. There's no rush. I've got all the time in the world. Let the miracles begin. Sometimes you and I, we feel like because God isn't rushing. You see, God doesn't triage your miracle. He is not concerned with the timetable. It is not even in his brain that he do it in our time schedule because God can make everything good whenever he chooses to. But we get so frustrated in our human mind, it's got to happen now, it's got to happen this way. I mean, if God would just go with the plan that I set up for him every single time that I need a miracle, life would be a lot more, or a lot less stressful, right? How many of you have ever caught yourself telling God how he's going to bring your miracle to pass? How many of you ever caught yourself not praying anymore, but planning God's day? Sometimes we are so instructional to God that he's looking down saying, are you kidding me right now? I promise we're going to get around to you, but it's not the time. And because God doesn't rush, we somehow feel like it is our faith. Like we have a lack of faith because God's not in a rush. But his lack of a rush doesn't have anything to do with the amount of faith that you have. Like if I build more faith, maybe God will run instead of walk. If I do something and I grit it out and I really grit my teeth and I work hard in this prayer, maybe God will begin to sprint towards what I need him to sprint to. But I'm here to tell you today that God doesn't rush for anybody. It doesn't mean he loves you any less, and it doesn't mean your faith is any smaller. A lot of times we guilt trip ourselves into doubt. Have you ever guilt tripped yourself into doubt? Man, I guess I just don't have enough faith for this. I guess I'm just going to have to stay here forever. I guess I just haven't built my faith up enough. I guess I'm just not a kind of faith person that so-and-so is because they were able to get their miracle, and I just haven't seen mine. I see people do this all the time. They guilt themselves into being a doubter. When we just have to walk by Jesus and watch him. See, all the way Jairus is not losing faith. He's building a repertoire. He's saying, look at what Jesus can do. He can heal this one. Look at what Jesus can do. See, Jesus is sometimes not doing what you want him to do and moving as quick as you want him to move. But his purpose is not to turn you into a doubter. His purpose is to build your faith. Because if you would lift up your eyes instead of looking at your navel wondering when God's going to get to you. Most Christians are looking down. That's why the Bible says, lift up your eyes and see that the harvest is white. God already knew if we're not looking at our phone, we're looking at our navel. It's all about us, right? All about our miracle, all about what we need. And we can choose to guilt trip ourselves into doubt, or we can choose to lift up our eyes and just view what God is doing. Man, I think he will do that. Look at that, what he did for them. He's no respecter of persons. If he'll do it for them, he'll do it for me. Somebody in here, you want a baby and you want it bad. And the devil's been trying to guilt trip you into letting that thing loose. And God's saying, lift up your eyes. Look and see that God is willing to do what only he can do in your situation. Don't you listen to the doubters. You see, in this next portion of Scripture, I want you to go with me to verse, let's look here. On down, we see in verse 35, while he was still speaking, someone came from the ruler of the synagogue's house who said, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler of the synagogue, he turned to him and he said, do not be afraid. Only believe. Jesus already knew what was about to happen because there's always a naysayer. You cannot listen to the people around you about your miracle. You can't do it. Because they will have something to say that will build doubt, but Jesus has something to say that will build your faith. I remember I was believing God to have Briley. They said I was going to have a difficult time in my childbirth, that I would never be able to have her like a woman should normally have a child, that it was going to be traumatic, that it was going to be hard on me and on her. And Brian and I didn't say anything to anyone. We just kept our eyes on Jesus. We called on one man who had an altar that he prayed to God every day. He would bring everyone's prayer requests that he knew, and he would lay them on this altar out on this farm in the middle of Tennessee. And we went and found him, and we gave him a paper with what they had said about our baby, and then we said it will not happen. That night he preached a sermon called Stake Your Claim, and he gave away wooden stakes. And on that stake I wrote, I will have it. A birth that was trauma-free and that God would bring forth my child in health. Didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my mama because she would have said, oh, poor thing. Didn't need someone feeling sorry for me. I needed God to do a miracle for me. Didn't tell Brian's mom because she would have done the same. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell anybody. I just told the man of God that would pray for me. And I took that stake and I stuck it down in my backyard, and we staked our claim on what God said that he would do. I'm at a party one night, and there's a woman there who I don't even know. She's a complete stranger. And she walks up to me, and like women do sometimes, she says, what is your birth plan? I am so glad I'm out of this stage in my life. So annoying. And I said, we're just believing God for the best, most natural birth that he can give us for our child to come forth in peace and in joy. She looked back. Don't ever think that you know the battle that somebody is fighting. Don't ever assume for 1 second that you can speak into what they're dealing with when you don't know the fight that they're fighting. I looked back at her and she said to me, well, that'll never happen. And I looked back and my spirit just cringed, and I said, thank you. We're going to believe the word of the Lord. And I just walked off, because that's what you do with the devil's voice. You leave it. And she was making fun of me in the other room. I could hear her with all these women mocking me because I thought that I was good enough to have a baby in a natural way. Well, I knew that that was the only way that we could get the miracle of God for our life. She didn't know. All she knew was what she knew. But I knew what God had said. So I stood there and I said, honey, I think it's time for us to get out of here. We went home and we staked our claim one more time that night, the night after that, the night after that, the night after that. Whenever that child came forth, she came forth perfectly, no trauma, no complication, no problem. God was faithful. I'm laying in the hospital room with this little baby. I'm so proud of God. I just can't even believe what he's done for us. Just so overwhelmed by his goodness. All fear and all the doubt that tried to creep in, and we'd fought the fight of faith. And how many of you know when you win a fight, it's a big deal? You should take some time and rejoice in it. And I'm sitting in my hospital room just thanking God for this precious child that he's given to me. And the phone rings in my hospital room. Never heard from that woman since the party. And all of a sudden, I hear her voice on the phone. She says, first words out of her mouth, "You didn't do it, did you?" That's the devil, y'all. I'm telling you what, I've never heard the devil's voice so clearly in all of my life. I thought, wow, she isn't just mean, she's vicious. She's chasing me down to rejoice in my failure, and she doesn't even know that I was fighting the fight of faith. She called herself a Christian, and yet she couldn't even detect that she was speaking doubt. This man is saying, your daughter's already dead. Leave the man of God alone. And he looks back, and Jesus looks at him. He says, don't you be afraid, only believe. Don't you listen to that voice. You look at me right here, eye to eye. Focus. Don't you be afraid. Only believe. We're going to your house. I promise you we're going to your house. That little girl's going to be all right. But I need you. See, God is looking not for someone perfect. He's just looking for a believer. One that'll fight the fight of faith. Stay in the game. And shut their ears to the crowd. And that day, I just said, guess what? I did do it, but it wasn't me. God was faithful to us. And our child came forth perfectly. I appreciate your concern, and I hung up the phone. Now, I decided that day that I would never, ever be the one who tries to bring doubt into someone's life, because I'm going to be a life dispenser. I'm going to be a word dispenser. When people look at me and they tell me what they have going on in their life, no matter how I feel, no matter how I think, no matter what I think I know, I just do my best to say, you know what, hon, I'm believing God with you. When people come up to me and they ask me for prayer, I say, what are you believing for? That's what I'm going to believe God for. What can we join together, stand together, and believe God for on your behalf? Because I never know what they're believing for, and I don't know what their life consists of, but I do know that God is faithful to his word. So he's walking down the street and he says, don't be afraid, only believe. A few more verses down, they get to his house and they have started mourning. Have you ever met a professional mourner? Someone who just absolutely loves to weep and cry. Those ones that at the funeral take that level of drama up about 10 times. You know that one. The professional mourner that is already mourning this child, even though Jesus has said that she will live and not die. They're everywhere. I promise you that when you're believing God for something, they're everywhere telling you that it can't happen. There are people everywhere telling you that that baby's dead. There are people everywhere telling you that your dream is dead, that your business will never make it, that you'll never be what God has told you to be. And I promise you that when God does his work, they'll show up at the after party like, I told you you could do it. It's the nature of people. They never want to get in the game beforehand. Be a believer that gets in the game when it matters. That's what God's looking for. He's looking for a life dispenser. He is looking for a believer. Jesus scanned that crowd. He took 3 of his disciples, and mom and dad and everyone else got put out. I'm going to give you a word from the Lord tonight, and you need to take this to heart, write it down, put it in your phone, write it on your mirror in your bathroom. Put the doubt out. Jesus looked and he said, I'll take these 3 disciples. Not even all the disciples got picked, you guys. They were close, like they were following the rabbi. His dust was upon them, and they didn't get picked. He said, I'll take 1, 2, 3, and mom and dad, because they had enough faith to call, to come, to watch the miracles, to stay in faith, and to not be in fear. Everyone else, you're out of here. Jesus wasn't afraid to hurt anybody's feelings to get a miracle. I'm telling you, if you want a real miracle in this life, you got to lose the fear of man and not be afraid to hurt somebody's feelings. Everybody wants you to do it their way, and God's saying, if you'll do it my way, we'll get the thing done. Are you so interested in what your family thinks about you that you're not willing to put the doubt out? Because if you won't put the doubt out, you'll never get the miracle of God. I worked with a man for years. I shouldn't say years, a little over a year, I guess. That was a worship leader in our church. He had a car accident. It severed this portion of his neck. He got cut. And it almost caused him to bleed out. It severed his vocal cords. He was a worship leader. They said, we may be able to get him back and stabilize him, but he will never sing again. Do you know what his wife did? She said, from this point on, everyone that comes in this room is a believer. If you do not believe that he is going to get up and he is going to sing again, you are not welcome in the room. But I'm his mama. I'm sorry. Do you believe that he'll sing again? Well, I hope so. You're out of here. She asked for the men of God from our church to stand guard at that door 24 hours a day. Not one person came in that door without being asked, do you believe that he will live and that he will sing again? And if they showed any doubt, those men of God would put the doubt out. But I'm his daddy. Too bad you got to believe God to get in this room, because we're getting a miracle. I'm telling you, what are you willing to do to get the miracle of God for your life? See, I've decided that I don't care who it separates me from or unites me with. I'm getting the will of God for my life. If it means that every friend I've ever thought was my friend has to go out the door and I have to find new ones, fine. Let's do it, God. I'm in. I'm done living a life where everybody tells me what God's going to do. I am starting to live the life of God with faith people around me. I laid in a bed with one of my kids with such high blood pressure they thought I'd die and the baby would die too. I'm telling you, I fought to have these kids. That's why I don't want anybody messing with them. Laying in the bed, I had a cousin come into the room and she said, I have high blood pressure. Your grandpa had high blood pressure. Your aunt had high blood pressure, and this is a sign. You're always going to have high blood pressure too. I said, oh, no, ma'am. I won't have high blood pressure because I have the blood pressure of my heavenly Father. I'm going to live and I'm not going to die, and I'm going to declare the works of the Lord. And then I looked up at Brian and I said, you got to get her out of here. She didn't come back. You got to put the doubt out. You got to put the doubt out. You got to be willing to put the doubt out at all costs. And that means surrounding yourself with the Word of God. Building the faith of God on the inside of you. Jesus takes mom, dad, and 3 disciples in there. He grabs her by the hand and he lifts her up onto her feet, and she comes back to life. Tells the people outside, what in the world is wrong with you? This girl's sleeping. She is taking a nap. Why is the whole village out here crying over a girl taking a nap in the middle of the day? They all feel probably pretty crazy because Jesus made it look like it was no problem. He went in, lifted her up. Mom and dad are so ecstatic. Can you imagine your child laying there dead and Jesus walking in and in one fell swoop just lifting her up? See, some of you are in the middle of a process right now of miracle, and you think it's going to take forever, and you don't see how it can ever work, and you're trying to manage it in your mind, and you're instructing Jesus on what he's going to do today. And all it takes is one hand from God. Just one. Brian and I fought for 5 years to get a loan for our building, our church. Our church was young. We didn't have any history, but it had just boomed, and we had no room for any people, and we needed a building really bad. And we fought for years to get it. We went to every bank. They would not give us the loan. Brian was so discouraged. He just got to the point he couldn't even stand to look at a bank. We were saying, God, you got to move on our behalf. You've got to do something. We prayed. We believed. One day I go to the nail salon. I tell Brian I'm anointed to go to salons. I'm in my gifting when I'm in the salon. That's a joke, you guys. You can laugh. I said, I'm in my gifting. I'm sitting in the pedicure chair where any woman likes to be. See, I'm even anointed in the pedicure chair. So I'm sitting there. I'm just having a good old time. There's an older lady sitting next to me, and I began to talk to her. Just be friendly. Always be friendly to people around you. If you're a God person, let the faith of God fall out of you and onto them. Be a life giver. Be a Pez dispenser for Jesus. Just start talking to her, speaking life over her, being kind to her, smiling at her. She fell in love with me. I became her best friend. Come to find out, she owns a bank. Never underestimate the power of a pedicure. I said, God, this is crazy. I was like, I met the owner of the bank. Here we go, God. You have got what it takes. I'm thinking we just remedied this sucker. I'm ready. Let's do this thing. I go home. I said, Brian, I found out what bank you need to go to. They're a little outside of town. So-and-so owns it. I just had a pedicure with her. We're buddies. He said, Jessi, I want you to go to that bank and ask them to give us $2.1 million. I was 28 years old, maybe older, 29. And I said, I don't do money around this church. That's not what I do. I'm not in the financial department. I don't want to touch that. No, thank you. I'm just letting you know, just let her know I'm your wife. It's going to be favor. I know God's going to set us up. Brian said, looks like you're the one with favor, so you get to go today. So me and another girl on our staff got dressed up, went out to this bank. We went in. I just knew when I walked in, they were going to hand me $2.1 million because I'd worked it out in my brain. I'd fixed God's problem for him. I walked in and I said, we'd like to talk to you about a loan. We had all of our financials set up. Everything looked good. And he's like, wow, actually it looks pretty good. He's looking at us like, who are you? And then he says, how much money do you need? And I said, $2.1 million. $2.1 million. The baby knows. I said, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. It's good, you know. And he said, we'll look through it and we'll talk. And he actually offered it to us with some contingencies that we didn't really want to do at the time. And I get in the car and I'm driving home, and a man I've known for years and years who's on our board calls me and he says, hey, Jess, what are you doing? I said, I'm driving home from this bank where they're going to give us this loan. I just know it. I believe God set us up. Tell him the story. He said, why aren't you borrowing the money from a bank in Owensboro? And I said, well, we've gone to everyone and they won't do it for us. And he said, well, hold on a second. That's ridiculous. I had no idea what was going to happen. I didn't set it up. I didn't figure it out. But he called and he said to his bank, he owns a business in town. Apparently, he does a lot of business. And he says to this banker, either you give my church the money for this building or I am pulling every account out of your bank that you have. And they called me in 15 minutes and they said, Mrs. Gibson, we'd love to come and talk to you about loaning you $2.1 million. It was a good day. You see, even when you think you know, you don't know. God is setting you up, and if you'll just keep the doubt out and build your faith and watch other people's miracles and not get mad when they get them. If you will look at someone's blessing and know that God is a blesser instead of wondering why he's not blessing you, God can release it into your world. He's looking for life dispensers. He's looking for love dispensers. He's looking at someone that will just say, Lord, everybody that bumps into me is going to get something sweet today, and you're going to take care of the miracle that I need. Because sometimes we get so consumed in our miracle that we forget that God is the reward. God is the reward. He doesn't give rewards. He is the reward. He's not serving rewards. He is the embodiment. Knowing him is the reward. Everything else is just icing on the cake. I'm telling you today that God wants to do miracles in and through you. He wants to do miracles for you. Jesus lifted that baby up out of that bed, and the very last thing I want you to see in this text is that he speaks to the family and he says, now don't go out and tell everybody, because all they're going to do is say, yeah, I had a piece of that. I told you that baby would get up. He said, I want you to just stay quiet and you feed that kid. Don't miss this part. It's at the very end. He says, I want you to stay quiet and feed that kid. Give that baby food. Jessi, why does this matter? Because I believe that one of the biggest mistakes that we make in the miracle is not remembering the blessing and nourishing it. We take what God has for us and then we just run for our lives. As if we run fast enough, we'll get away from all the bad stuff and the blessing will stay clear. We in fear take the blessing and run away with it and don't share it with everybody else. Don't feed it. Don't nourish it. You pray for a spouse for 10 years and then God delivers one and you won't take them on a date. Feed your kid. If I kept the baby alive, feed it for goodness sake. Feed that thing. You believe God to plant a church? Then take care of that church. You believe God to give you a church to go to? Then go ahead and give and bless and tithe and serve and see what else God won't do for you. You believe God for children and he gave them to you, and now you're frustrated because they're digging your earrings into an egg bite and losing your really precious ring that you had. That's what happened to me 2 days ago. Chapel put my little earrings in an egg bite on the counter. She said, no, I didn't. I don't know who did it, but they were in the egg bite. And here I am frustrated, and God's just saying, feed those kids. Just feed them. Don't ever take for granted the blessing that God has for you. Make sure that you nourish it, that you take care of it, that you cause it to grow, that it doesn't stop right there, that you don't stop with just the miracle, but that you feed that thing, grow it, and turn it into the greatness that God has called it to be. See, that child's life wasn't over. It had lots of life left to live. And God entrusted it to those believers, not the doubters. He gave that child back to believers and said, I dare you to feed that kid and see what I'll do with their life. What is your miracle? What do you need to feed? If you'll begin to believe God and rejoice with others, I believe that the miracle will come to pass in your life. And when it does, I'm begging you, don't forget to nourish it. Let God use you. Let God help you. Let God lift you. I want to pray for you tonight. Will you stand up on your feet? We prophesied and prayed beforehand. I just want to pray over you. If you need a miracle from the Lord, you're looking for someone to join in faith with you, go ahead and lift a hand to heaven tonight. If you just got one and you want to know the wisdom on how to feed it, stick your hand up tonight. If you want to be a God dispenser full of faith and joy and goodness, go ahead and lift your hand up tonight. Father, I bless these people in the name of Jesus. I ask, God, that you would help them, strengthen them, send faith friends around them, life dispensers, miracle dispensers, blessing dispensers. Lord, let them be one, let them have one. We ask for your joy to come into their life, Lord, in the area of this miracle. Lord, I don't know what it is that they need, but I know that you're on the scene. Do not be afraid, only believe. It's what you're saying over them tonight. Do not be afraid, only believe.